2020 has been a challenging year, but we kind of wanted to go through and highlight some of the activities that have gone on this year. Not only did we have the situation that we've had with COVID, but there were some legislative changes and initiatives that went through as well. So there's been a lot of balancing acts going on in the operations of the center and the administration of the center that we've had to deal with. As I've told my board, when we start looking at some of the statistical data over the next few years, I think 2020 will be one of those years we just really need to throw out. So, but I kind of wanted to go through and share with you some of those highlights that we have had. But before we go into that, one of the things that I wanted to kind of share with you, our accountant was not able to join us today due to a conflict with another meeting, but I wanted to kind of go through and give you some financial highlights of the operations. So every year, the Alabama 811 accounting has either a annual review or an annual audit. The board had agreed several years ago that our audit would be done on a 5-year basis. So we have a full-blown audit every 5 years with a review in the years in between. And the only real difference between that is that the audit does some outside verification checks to make sure what we show on the books for our member accounts or some of our vendor accounts matches their records. Outside of that, the annual review that we did that is conducted has those same parameters outside of those outside audits. So the review itself is pretty comprehensive. But this slide just shows you a comparison between the 2018, which was an audit year for us, compared to 2019. And this looks at total revenues, both for Alabama 811 and then the side project that we do as a cost sharing between our gas and pipeline companies for their federal regulations on pipeline awareness. So those books are actually kept separate within the Alabama 811 organization, but when we're having to report in a financial, they have to be combined. So this total revenues from membership, both for Alabama 811 and APAC, you'll see that our total revenues went up about $170,000 from 2018 to 2019. Our expenses went up just under $50,000 for those correlating years. One of the initiatives that the Alabama 811 board set several years ago was that we build up operational reserves, so that if something should happen, like what a lot of companies have dealt with this year related to 2020, we would be able to have operational expenses that we would be able to continue to operate should we have issues with funding coming in on a timely basis. So our goal was to have a minimum of 6 months, and for several years we actually included in the line item a budget line item that built into that reserve so that we could build up those funding. That was discontinued several years ago. But in doing so, we've also been able to continue to maintain either through investments and other years where we may be able to put some of the money back into those reserves and for depreciation. So we currently have a little over 7 months that we have in operating reserves should anything have happened. One of the things, just as a side note, is we have, as you'll see as we go through some of the operational slides, 2020 has not been a slow year for us, and we've been very fortunate that due to the volume and stuff that we've had, that we've been good with members continuing to make their payments for operations. So we have not had a huge financial impact in this year with a lack of funding as well. So that's just some information on the financial report. Again, the 2020 financials will be a review for this year as opposed to an audit. So moving forward into just the operational activities, as most of you know, and if you've dealt with your own company, one of the things that made a large impact for us this year was the impact of operations under the COVID-19 impacts. One of the things, as you're aware, in 2011, we managed to get in the path of a tornado that came through and hit our building. In the process of that recovery and beginning to look at business continuity needs, we have worked to transition our operations more to a cloud-based environment so that we had much more of a mobile environment. When COVID-19 hit and we were having to look at how to continue to man operations, we have a lot of our call center agents, contact center agents, who do already work from home. But due to some of the things that we had been doing in the past, we were able to go ahead and get all of our contact center agents working at home fairly quickly. As Matt will go into this a little bit more in his operations reports, in technology report. But we were very fortunate. There were a lot of 811 centers across the United States that had not had the ability to do that, and so it was much harder for them as they began to try to transition their work staff to a mobile workforce. But we were able to do that, and since that time we've transition some of the agents that we had planned to transition anyway to a work at home environment a little quicker, and those will stay. Right now, we have approximately 2 full-time and 4 part-time people who are working in the office at any time. The rest of the agents are still working from home. We also moved the management staff to work from home, and when things first happened. So we had one staff member here at the office to handle things like mail and deliveries and that type of thing, who chose to continue to work, but the rest of the management staff worked from home. Beginning in June, when some of the state mandates began to change a little bit, we transitioned some of the agents back to the office, and those are the ones I mentioned who are now still currently working in the office. And then what we did with the management, because of some of the guidelines in the state of Alabama to try to minimize the number of people in an enclosed area at any time, we transitioned our management team so that they have assigned days that they are in the office. So there is someone on pretty much any day, there's someone in operations who's here to handle things that may come up in the physical location, as well as someone either in the administration or the promotional education area. And then we alternate our staff meeting days on Wednesdays still, just so that we can stay within those guidelines of people. So it has worked very well. I don't think we have not had any feedback from any of our members or contractors that they have seen any change in the operations. I think, it's internal operations that we have made as a management decision to try to ensure that the safety and health of our employees, but it has not impacted any of the operational changes as we've moved along. And so when you start looking at those changes that we've had this year and where those operational changes may or may not impacted, one of the areas that we always look at is the locate request volume. And you'll see that for 2020, if you look from January through September of this year as compared to 2019, we are currently running about a 10% decrease in our overall locate request, and as compared to last year. And this was not unexpected. One of the things that we will look at and why that decreases down is you will see when you look at this slide relative from, this is year to date 2020, so this is through the end of September, as compared to the full calendar year of 2019. And you will see that for the most part, we've stayed pretty steady, except for when you look at normal tickets. Our normal tickets, which means a locate request, that's your usual 2 working day notice on those, is a little bit lower than it was for last year. And you'll notice on the far end, to the far right of the graph, that you will see updates. The updates for 2020 are running just under 60,000 locate requests for the year, where updates for last year for the total year was 160,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about those and why in just a second. But this slide right here will show you a year-to-date comparison to the January through September comparison year-to-date. So you can see kind of how those volumes have changed. You'll see a huge increase in refresh marks of up to 176%, where you will notice that the ticket volume's not that much, but percentage-wise, it was. So when you look at the normal tickets, when I showed you that and the normal tickets were lower from this year compared to last year, but if you look at it year to year for the same time period, the normal tickets are actually higher than we were from last year. So why have these changes impacted? Well, some of this has to do with the changes that happened in the law. This beginning January of 2020, the law was changed so that a locate request life, or the ticket life as some people refer to it, was originally 10 working days. So when someone placed a locate request, if their work was not going to be completed within 10 days, they were legally required to call back into the One Call Center or update their ticket online so that the utilities were aware that the work was continuing at that site. Beginning in January, that moved from a 10 working day to a 20 working day. So we expected to see that there would be some change from those updates, which if you look back at this particular slide, I went the wrong way, sorry. But if you look at this particular slide, you'll see on the far right, the updates do show that our update count, again, is lower for this year as compared to last year. So what we expected to see did happen. And so that was what we were looking at, that there would be a reduction of updates for remarks. And the intent was hopefully that as we've had some complaints over the years of utilities not being marked within their required 2 working day notice, the hope was that this would allow the utility companies be able to stay up with that increase of call volume because they were not having to go out as often to refresh marks. And the lines at the bottom will show you just the difference between the updates of about 53% that we're down. So it's been ballpark about 50% as the year has balanced out after the first quarter or so, that the updates were actually down. The other thing that also impacted those numbers is that the notification period beginning January 1 also changed. Prior to the beginning of this year, a locate request was good for 2 working days, beginning at the date of notification. As of January 1 of this year, that changed to where it no longer counted the day of notification. So if an excavator would call in on Monday morning, all locate requests would begin effective 7 o'clock the next business day. And so what we expected from that is that that would hopefully, again, help the utilities to be able to manage the continued growth of locate requests because, one, they were not having to remark them as often. And secondly, they now had 2 full working days. So they had all day, those requests called in on Monday, provided an all day Tuesday and an all day Wednesday area that they could go out and locate those facilities. So what we were hoping was that that would reduce some of the second notifications. What we have seen, though, is unfortunately our second notifications have gone up. And this is when an excavator will call back and state that a particular facility or all the facilities at a site have not been marked. Now you'll notice that the percentage is 7%, the actual ticket numbers are not that different. You're talking about less than 700. Looking at that year to date. But that was one thing that we expected to see. So again, what impacted both of these numbers? And without a doubt, you would have to say that a lot of that happened with COVID-19. When we look at those normal requests, what we saw and what a lot of people reported at looking at consumer traffic at Home Depot and Lowe's and other hardware and home improvement stores was that people were out doing the work. And what we've seen looking at it through September is that we had about a 37% increase in homeowner tickets. So a lot of those locate requests that we received were for homeowner projects that were going on. And this wasn't just for Alabama. A lot of other states have reported that as well. And just to kind of give you a graphic, if you look at homeowner tickets, 2019 is the blue line across the bottom. You can see the number of increase that we've had in homeowner tickets. Again, that's not necessarily a large quantity and volume when you look at, 4,500 that we had in May. But these are tickets that there are new callers that aren't familiar with the process. There are callers that work in an area where the facility owners may have to go out and do a little bit more detail and explaining. So usually when you're dealing with a homeowner scenario, you expect to have a little bit more of a communication gap that you have to deal with, as opposed from a seasoned excavator that is a little bit more familiar with the operations. So one of the things that we also saw with COVID-19 is even though we were able to work through a lot of that in our operations, being able to send our call center and contact center agents at home, we did see that some of our facility owners and the locate companies did have an impact on their workforce, where they may have someone who had an employee who had either contracted COVID-19 or had been exposed to it, and then they were having to put them on the required quarantine time frame, so they may lose some of the manpower. There was also some delays on projects. We had a couple of engineering firms that we were working on some case study projects with, and they had that same scenario. Even though their crews were smaller crews, they may have 2 people in a vehicle, somebody would get sick and they'd be off, and then they'd have to quarantine the person that was in the vehicle with them. So some of those things also impacted what we see on some of those second notice updates, as our member companies and locating companies had to deal with the impacts they had from COVID. So as more people were home doing more work, you also had the impact on some of the staff availability. Some of the other operational impacts that we have seen this year has to do with, as we look at some of the legal requirements, that there was a shift on when locate requests were going to be placed, where normally on the historical scenario, if they called in on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, the locate was going to be good by 8 o'clock on Wednesday. So we saw we used to have a big push from excavators calling in on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Thursday and Friday tended to be a slower day. One of the things that we've seen as the law has changed and we've moved is how that ticket volume, and a lot of this is looking at the voice tickets. We do have the ability for excavators to enter their tickets online, and that, a lot of times may stay a little bit more stagnant. But Matt will talk a little bit more about this in his discussion as well. But just looking at the voice traffic flow in 2019, you can see for the most part, it's a fairly steady pattern as when the calls come in, when your peaks and valleys were on staffing for the agents to be able to handle the manual telephone calls. If you look at 2020, it's much more varied. You can see that the gaps move a good bit as to when it is and begins to level out a little bit more. And just to look at the two of them comparison, you can see where things were a little bit lower at 12 o'clock, because most people were trying to hit that early morning hit so that they would have it to be able to work on those mornings. It's kind of filtered out a little bit. As Matt and his staff has continued to look at this, we're still trying to narrow down. Again, as I had stated earlier, the challenge with this year is there were some things that we expected that we were going to work through, but some of the other impacts, such as the COVID situation that we're having to work with, is trying to really find what are going to be historical trends that we need to continue to operate off of, and what impacts may have come in from outside influences. And one of the other areas that has kind of come up that we've had to deal with is a question around holidays and weekends. We've had some people who expressed the concern that if they call in on a Thursday, then and there's a holiday in there, how that fits into it. So we've had a little work on educating the excavating community on just how to kind of rethink how they plan their work and schedule their work, with the way that not counting the date of notification, since they were always kind of used to working through that. So it's been a little bit of an educational trend. Some of the things that we did to try to offset some of those is information we sent out to contractors, and both on the voice recording and as well as the remote ticket entry, we put in precursor messages for those so that the excavators would be aware that those laws were changing and what was going on. And we continued those messages into the first of the year so that they would get that information as well, because there was no guarantees that, someone may have called in at the end of the year, they may have started after the first of the year. So we tried to educate them beforehand and continue during the process. Another area that we had to deal with this year, as if, those weren't big enough, one of the things that also came in with the legislation was that membership requirement was enacted. And the legislation had this as a tiered process. So beginning from January of 2021, any utility company that had more than 25,000 customers was required to be a member. And then beginning in January of 2022, all the remaining facility owners that have less than 25,000 customers would have to come on as a member. So we've spent a lot of this year working with those larger utilities to have them on. Of the ones that were identified and we've worked with, I think only one has not come on. They've scheduled dates and continue to push it off. But the other ones that fit in that category, and there was just a handful, have come on and have started activating those operations. What we have done, because we don't want to end up having a flux of smaller utilities coming on at the end of next year to be inactive by January 2022, we have worked through the ability to go through and identify those people. We've reached out to all of the identified facility owners, provided them information, and kind of have a schedule to go back and check with them and work with them to get them on. So the intent is hopefully to be able to get those on as the year goes on and try not to bring them on at the last minute and impact our operational staff as well. But what we found is there's a lot of people who are going on early. One of the things that has been communicated to us in the past from some non-members was the people in their operational fields wanted to be a member, but somewhere in management felt that wasn't the best course. So they've used the opportunity to say, well, membership is required now to come on. So we're continuing to see, we probably are averaging probably 2 to 5 members a month that have come on, even through the COVID operations. We've also tried to streamline some of the membership requirements and to help get them on and automate some of those areas. So in a more of a mobile environment, when they may not be in the office, that we can have them do electric signing of agreements and different things. So we've kind of worked to try to make it as streamlined and uncumbersome as possible for those facility owners coming on. And the other thing that has been involved, if we didn't load our plate enough, is positive response. Alabama is one of the few states in the southeastern region that did not have a required positive response. And positive response refers to once the excavator makes that locate request, that once the facility owners have marked, that there's some form of a response back to the excavator to let them know that the facilities have been marked and they should be cleared to begin their excavation. We did start a voluntary response system about a year, a little over a year and a half ago, maybe, to try to test out a lot of the kinks, work through some of the issues. And we worked with some of our major facility owners and contract locating companies to begin to test that and build those in. So right now, our staff has continued during this year to reach out to all of our members who are not using it, explain how it works, and continue to get them identified and to get them on and to make sure that they're aware. So we've done an additional push for that going into this last quarter. And I know that there will be some people we probably will not have on until after the first of the year as we continue just to work through and educate them. But we've had pretty successful response from the facility owners to get them on. And one of the probably last biggest areas that we've had to address is the law change included some enforcement provisions. As all of you, I'm sure, are aware, under the current law that we have, any enforcement actions are taken either through the district attorney or the attorney general. And we haven't had a historical record of a lot of enforcement actions being taken. So with a effort that was made a couple of years ago from a task team established by the governor, a lot of different avenues of enforcement across the United States were looked at and reviewed and discussed with the stakeholder group to try to look at what would be the best way. And what was finally decided was to look at having an enforcement board made up of stakeholder representatives from those entities that are involved in underground damage prevention. So that was supposed to be established with most of the appointments coming from the governor's office within 90 days of the effective date of the law, which was January 1. So by April 1st, that board had to be in place. So we began working with the governor's office and different stakeholder groups to try to get a slate of representatives to put to the governor for appointment at the end of last year. And those were established I believe right is by the end of February. And so that enforcement board has been created, and there's been a lot of work that's been going on behind the scenes to try to get the process and the procedures together to be able to enact that enforcement as soon as possible. One of the requirements under the law was that there should be an executive committee. So the full enforcement board was established, and then an executive committee of 5 representatives from that enforcement board were elected and approved. And as far as once the executive committee was established, we also established different committees to look at areas that needed to be addressed. One area that we had to address is the law required that the governance of the enforcement committee be administered under the Alabama Administrative Procedures Act. So with that, there were several guidelines and requirements under state statute that the enforcement board had to follow and get established. So part of that was establishing administrative rules. So those rules were developed and approved, and they had to be submitted to the state to be posted for comment, and they had to be posted for a certain amount of days, and then comments had to be taken into consideration. Revisions to those rules had to be made and adopted by the board, and then filed with the state as certified rules. So those things have been done. As part of the requirements, there's a 45-day period from the time that they were published as certified rules before they could be enacted. So the intent is hopefully that the enforcement committee will be able to, pending any other state hoops to jump through, that the enforcement board should be allowed to hear violation complaints beginning about mid-November. So to be able to accommodate that, we had to establish a website. And so that a website is being fine-tuned to be up and running. We've looked at the process on how those complaints will be filed, how they will be handled. The the Alabama Public Service Commission has agreed to take on the administration of that, not from an enforcement process, but handling the paperwork as it comes in and communicating that information to the enforcement board. In addition, we had to work on setting up a fund that any penalty claims would go into under the state funding, and that has been is still in process, and work on training, because part of the penalty provisions would require potential training to be mandated. So those areas are some of what's gone on. So a lot of this has happened since the 1st of March as this group has continued to work. So like I said, there's been a lot of work behind the scenes to be able to have this in place and operational. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but we do have our damage prevention session that is coming up that we had to move, and there will be a full blown session about the enforcement on Tuesday doing that will go through more detail on how that process works, showing the website interface and those areas as well. So if you're not attending the summit and are looking for additional information, that will be one area that will go into a lot more detail than we have time for today. So that kind of gives you an idea of just some of the operational highlights that we've had and overall challenges that have come on this year. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Matt Brown. Matt Brown is over our IT and operational departments for Alabama 811, and let him just kind of highlight some of the technology that we've interacted with and enhanced and implemented over this past year that has helped us meet some of those challenges as well.
Thanks, Annette. 2020, like Bob and Annette said, I think it could be summed up with one word: that's challenging. And Annette's covered it pretty closely. We've had 2 major challenges over this past year. We've had let me see if I can advance the slide here. COVID and the law changes, and both of them kind of presented some unique challenges. But fortunately, like Annette said, we've been planning for this for a while. Since the tornado, one of our primary focuses has been on business continuity And so I'll step through that. A lot of these technology presentations are usually about the flashy stuff on the front, but I think this is a good opportunity to kind of pull the curtain back and look at some of the things that, some people might think they're boring, but these are the things that you don't see behind the scenes that allow us to keep functioning and that have really helped us maintain some semblance of normalcy through this challenging year. Okay, so the first major challenge we dealt with COVID is we, like a lot of people, have our agents in the office, or had our agents in the office, and they sat at desktop computers and cubicles. And when they need to go home, you just can't pick those things up and pack them, especially when we can't send IT staff into homes. It makes it for a very difficult situation. So this is a simple thing that we did, and we had already planned on it. We hadn't actually made the purchase yet, but we had already planned and budgeted for laptops in case of emergency so people could kind of get out quickly. There was a bit of a challenge at first because they weren't available. They were gone with the toilet paper and the paper towels in the first couple of weeks there. But we got them, and they went home. Everybody went home at first, and Annette's already mentioned, we've kind of settled back in. Some people didn't like that. They wanted to come back immediately. We considered it, and we said, if there's 1 or 2 people in the office, it's a big office, they could spread out. It's probably okay. And we're currently in a situation where there's 2 full-time and now 4 part-time in the office, and everybody else is remote. And most of the agents will probably stay there. They've enjoyed it. They've adjusted well to it. In the back end side of it, there's a couple of big pieces, and these are the ones we'd really worked on: the locate request system, the phone system, and our quality control processes. These had all been moved to the cloud over the past 4 years in different phases, and we've really kind of enhanced those processes, and they've really made it easy for us, as easy as could be. The main one that everyone sees, the locate request system, how the tickets are entered and processed. This was moved in 2016. We moved it to the Microsoft Azure cloud. This allows all the agents, all the management, everything can be done as long as there's an internet connectivity. We don't need any access to our physical office for that. It's nice here because we have good internet and it's reliable, but other than that, anybody else can go in. I or other technology staff can log in and manage servers and everything from home. In the early stages, we had some bandwidth issues. I think everybody saw that. Everybody went home. Everybody's kids were at home. They were on Netflix. During that time, we updated some of our connections. We tightened down some of our database processes, and it's really made the system more resilient overall. And all those things will help going forward. And then we also leaned in and kind of put some extra effort into providing do-it-yourself help on the web portal to give more resources. Now on the right here, you can see this is a snapshot of our management dashboard. You can see the databases and all the servers. We can log in at a glance and see it. But from the web portal side, we really added frequently asked questions. We tried to put a full explanation of everything somebody might need to find, trying to cut down on phone calls as much as possible. There's instructional videos, and we've recently added a homeowner request portal, and this has been huge with this increase. Homeowner requests are, as Annette said, difficult. They're a great opportunity, but on average, they take about 1.5 times as long to process. They can be frustrating. And so as much as possible, if we can move these to the website, but the full portal is a little bit too complicated. So we have a step-by-step process that walks them through. It has some kind of helpful explanations along the way and gives them a full explanation at the end. And the percentage increase in this is just off the charts, and in the access through the homeowner locate request portal. So that's been a huge savior with the fluctuating call volume. We've also, with the cloud, we've been able to continue development on a new version of our system. It makes it easy. We don't have to be in the office. We can build new servers, new databases, test and tear them down without having to have actual physical location. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The phone system, this one was moved to the cloud in 2018. It like the locate request system, as long as the agents have internet, they can log in and take calls. And the nice thing here is the quality management is integrated directly into this platform. So we're not having to have supervisors and managers in the call center next to the people taking the calls or looking over their shoulder as they're processing the portal tickets. And as you know, with the locate request platform, we've kind of used this as an opportunity to help fine tune that process and really make sure we're taking full advantage of all the resources we have. This is an example of our phone dashboard. It shows, you know, the ongoing quality for the day, how many calls we answered within 30 seconds, what the average speed of answer, so how long it took them to answer the phone, was there a wait, what the status of any given call, or what all the agents are doing. The supervisors can see this from their house, from the office. It's internet based, so they don't need to be in the office staring at a wallboard to know what's going on. I mentioned the quality management. Monthly or weekly, supervisors are sent a random sample of calls, interactions that the agents have done, either processing tickets that have come in through the website or actual phone calls, and they're given a form alongside the video, and it has, you know, a series of questions. Were they pleasant? Did they mark things correctly? And as they're grading that, they can see their full desktop, both monitors, and they can see the recording and the sentiment of the caller. But this allows them to see if there is a problem. What were you doing? Why were you having trouble with that? If it was marked wrong, why did you pick the wrong work site? These things. This has really helped us to maintain a high level of quality, even though we're separated from the agents. There's some that are hours away now. So the second major challenge we faced, and this one was probably more disruptive than COVID in terms of operations, was the law change. And Annette's detailed most of this. Most of the major changes to the system were done in 2019, fortunately. We had the ticket life and the workday and all that had to be ready for January 1. So we had that all the way. We've had a lot of back and forth with the new members, since this is the year that the bigger members come on. They have big, complicated workforce systems, and they require a lot of integration. So we've done a lot of back and forth with vendors and with technology staff in those companies, and it's been a great learning opportunity for us. We've really, I think, improved our process with dealing with those and really come up with some new solutions for delivering tickets. The other thing, and Annette mentioned this too, is the changes in the life of the ticket and the notice period. They really altered our long established call patterns. And so we had to come up with a unique way to deal with that. Usually we kind of had an understanding that we're going to need a bunch of people ready to answer the phone or to process portal tickets at 8 o'clock, and then they could kind of taper off, and then we'd slow down in the fall. And that's been disrupted. And so we've tried to find ways to avoid hiring for lots of reasons to maintain efficiency, and hiring is extremely difficult in this environment. And so what we've done is we've created a custom scheduling app that shows us at any given time during the day how many agents are available, how many are off completely, how many are available to answer portal tickets and voice tickets. And so the supervisor can quickly go in if somebody calls in for the day and see, oh, we're going to be short at this time, and then ask if anybody needs overtime or if they can alter their break or lunch. And then taking this data, we're also able to apply it to ongoing call patterns and develop a real heat map for throughout the day based on how many agents we had available, how many tickets were we taking per agent? How many? We have some agents that are dedicated to just taking web portal tickets and some that are just dedicated to taking voice calls. And so we can see like how many of those types of interactions are coming in, how many types of requests, and how many agents are available in staffing to deal with that on a month-to-month basis. And we've kind of adjusted staffing. We've moved to adding some part-time staff to help cover the changes and the spread out in the afternoon. And you could see, if you look at this chart, that in May, right after the first hit, we had a kind of a hot spot in the afternoon for all across the board, and then for the assisted portal in the morning. And we've really kind of smoothed that out as time went on. And I think that being able to track things through technology where everyone has access to this and can kind of see it and be more agile with our staffing has really been a benefit. The membership, Annette's mentioned, has been a challenge. It's been a great opportunity for us. We've enjoyed interacting with new people and hearing new processes. And we've moved past the phase of the big integrations. We're going to start moving into more of the challenge with the small members is going to be GIS and mapping. So we're developing a new online service area editor, and we're using it internally, and I think that'll help a lot. If you want to see more about that, I'll be talking about it at the Damage Prevention Summit on December 2nd at 10 a.m. And we'll cover that in detail with a deep dive in the technology behind that. I think it's pretty exciting. And I think with that, I'll turn it back to Annette.
Okay, and I have the realty. And next, I kind of wanted McKay to kind of address some of the marketing and education updates. McKay has taken the lead in a lot of the challenges that we've had, and how do we continue to educate in an environment when people aren't getting together. With so many of our presentations in the past have been face-to-face educational opportunities, how do we look at ways to continue to educate people, especially in the year that we had so much change, as we've shown with the law changes. So McKay handles all of our outside education, marketing, and public awareness processes, and many of y'all are familiar with seeing him at different association meetings. So with that, I will turn it over and let McKay take over and talk about his area.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this rolling. I think that did it. There we go. So just kind of touching on a few things that it has been a challenge. I'll just kind of mention that this week was the first week that we did an in-person conference since March. So that was a real interesting. It went well. They did everything very safely. It was the Electric Cities of Alabama, but that's the first one that we've done in our normal kind of situation and atmosphere where we're used to being kind of out and about, and how have we adapted to that? But I'll tell you, 2020 started really strong. I was really encouraged by a lot of the opportunities that basically kind of came our way basically the first quarter of the year. So we kind of started just highlighting on a few of them. The Utility Contractors Association, we kind of went around to each of their regional groups in regional meetings and just kind of did a little introductory of the law changes and just kind of touched on some of the talking points on that, followed by typically about every January, February, we have the Vegetation Management Conference, which is about 600 or so. And then the two that were kind of unique, that were some unique opportunities, one was the Birmingham Home Show. Last year was our first year to work the Birmingham Home Show, and I just felt, as far as representing 811 and the 460 some odd members that we have, kind of getting that message out there, getting that message out to one of those audiences such as homeowners and remodelers and those kind of groups that are sometimes difficult to reach and really pin down. So we did the Birmingham Home Show. Jefferson County area, Birmingham area is still one of the highest locate volume areas in the state, if not the highest. And so felt like it was a good match. I'll show you a couple of photos in just a second, kind of roll through those. And then we did the Bassmaster Classic, which is obviously a big deal. Bass is headquartered here in Birmingham. This was their 50th anniversary, so they held the Bassmaster Classic here in Birmingham at the BJCC. And that kind of closed out our pre-COVID, I guess, situation. So let me kind of just touch on a few things with it. So first and foremost, went a little too fast here. So we did work the Birmingham Home Show, and so what was kind of neat about that is they're always kind of needing speakers talking on different subjects and those kind of things. So last year, I kind of ended up just randomly establishing a pretty good relationship with kind of the home show, the company that directs it. And so we spoke all 3 days last year, and then they called us up this year and said, hey, we still need some folks. And so we kind of did a little feature highlight thing. But then in addition to that, that kind of led to the fact that we said yes, and we're willing to do it. And I'm willing to do anything, to an extent. I'll just, if you look at the photo example there, that would be myself, the Fox 6 News person, and the home show PR company all sitting in a hot tub. So that, we had a couple of news features on a few different news stations, and really featured 811, but also that we would just be at the home show. And so it was kind of a great opportunity that we didn't have to pay for. But we had about 26,000 attendees over a 3-day period. Really, really fun. And my goal was this year that we had a backhoe or a track hoe of some sort, and or a mini excavator in our booth. So as you can see from the photo there, we had an excellent setup. And also because of the rapport that I kind of established with this group last year, what was really, really neat about it is that this booth is typically twice as much. And because of the fact that, I was willing to kind of help out and do a few things for them and those kind of things, we got that booth again for half price this year. But Hayes had a hookup with a mini excavator, and so we had something for the kids and folks to kind of come and sit in, and it was kind of neat. So that was kind of our first thing. And then a few weeks afterwards, I think for some reason, there it goes. We had the Bassmaster Classic, so March 6th through 8th. This was pretty much the week before everything shut down. And the very top thing is we had 126,000 people through the Birmingham Jefferson Civic Center in 3 days. So that's probably a really good little incubator thing that happened. I'll tell you just on some of the photos, I'll show you in just a second, a few kind of funny things out of that. We gave away approximately 15,000 811 promotional items, but that was a great target audience group, a lot of blue collar kind of folks, a lot of people, most people from Alabama, but we did speak with people from Canada. We spoke with people from Michigan that come down for this thing, but obviously a large percentage coming from Alabama. We were able to partner up 3 states kind of contributed, contributed to the cost, and then also Georgia contributed their Digger Dog mascot that goes around to all their schools, and it's a professional mascot organization. And we were able to bring Mark Stowe down, and Mark Stowe, some of you might know, he has it's called The Direction, but it's a fishing show, and he features 811 very heavily on all of his promotional type things. And so we were able to bring him and his group down, and we kind of set up a really nice setup booth to be able to kind of have kind of a presence there and really kind of go after that target audience and market. So just a few photos, just kind of describing some of the things that we did. Mark has his boat is $100,000+ set up with all the graphics and those kind of things that he has on it, and it is super, super nice. What I thought was really interesting is there were all these boat sales companies, but there really weren't any custom boats with companies that had that. So we had a real kind of neat feature that brought a lot of attention and brought people in. And we actually partnered up, and they have a connection for us to be able to get some really nice 811 fishing rods. So when we had a contractor or an excavator come up and just kind of say, hey, hey man, we use you guys all the time, or I work for so-and-so, we'd kind of take an opportunity if we still had a few, and we'd pull one of those rods out and give it to them as just kind of a thank you for using the system and kind of a reminder. So middle picture, just kind of some of the folks that helped. That's Mark Hayes, That's Hayes Benson that works with me and doing a lot of the conferences and trade shows. And then Mark's son is there on the left. And then on that right photo is Digger Dog. That's Georgia 811's mascot. What's kind of neat about that is it's a professional mascot organization that they use. And so this guy right here is actually one of the mascots that the Atlanta Falcons use. Super nice guy, and he really, really worked the crowd on Saturday. It was neat. But we were actually probably the only booth that had sanitizer in the whole place. And just kind of give you an example of that. I think I ended up taking the photo out because it was a little blurry, but there were so many people that by the time I walked in the BJCC, it would take me 10 to 15 minutes to get to our booth because we were on the other side of it. It was shoulder to shoulder. I've never seen that many people in there. But we just kind of take the opportunity to kind of, if we had contractors or any groups come up and talk to us, to kind of present. And that's just kind of a version of that 811 boat. But that was a great situation that last year they did it in Knoxville, Tennessee, the Bassmaster. And so Tennessee 811, they did it. We kind of helped partner with them last year. This is something that I hope kind of continues throughout the country when Bassmaster comes and does their thing. I think in Tennessee last year, because everything was right by the river, they had 200 and something thousand people there. But it's a great opportunity, a good audience to kind of reach out to. And so that was something I was really, really excited about. And then, of course, within the next week or so, everything kind of got shut down. So referring to the APAC program that Annette mentioned earlier, the APAC program is a pipeline program, that pipeline public awareness program that we help coordinate for about 70 plus gas and pipeline operators around the state. Typically, it's a year-round kind of deal. Typically in January through March, we're booking meeting facilities, we're booking caterers, we're getting everything ready for the meetings, the face-to-face meetings that occur in July and August. So we had already sent out some checks to some meeting facilities and those kind of things. And then, of course, all this hit. So we kind of had to change gears. And we kind of just decided early on, after communicating with some of our pipeline operators and those kind of things, that even if the situation got better later in the year, I didn't want to put those 70-something operators in a pickle where we're having to scramble to do something, in October, November, or December. So we kind of decided early on that we were going to do a different format of doing webinars and then a targeted mailing that helped these operators still meet all their baseline messaging. There's a lot of requirements that go along with it. So that's what we chose to do, and we stayed in constant communication with these operators. We tried to communicate as much as possible every Monday for about a month and a half to 2 months prior to the meetings that occurred at the 1st of August. I had just kind of a weekly communication with them and just kind of rolled that process along. And so this was my first and Hayes's first, and I'm sure he probably got tired of me because we rehearsed that presentation. I can't tell you how many times, but we wanted to try to still make sure and provide some kind of quality product. And we had 600 attendees over 10 meetings, which I thought was a pretty good percentage. That was an average of 60, and obviously not what we have been used to in the past. But what was really nice about this is the meeting facilities that we had already sent money to, all those kind of things. Everyone understood the situation. Everyone was very easy to deal with, and returning deposits, those kind of things. But we ended up doing those meetings in August, and we became go-to webinar experts in a matter of about a month to try to make sure that thing ran smoothly. And that's just one of the things that we really had to kind of pick up and change gears on this year. Just completely different than anything we've done. But some of the lessons that I think were learned out of that is that even in subsequent years, if we go back to these face-to-face meetings, which we do on a regional kind of situation, 4 to 5 counties typically grouped together, what it's taught me is that even after those face-to-face meetings are done, I think conducting some form of a webinar afterwards for people that weren't able to attend face-to-face is probably something that will occur from now on. So some cool things really came out of this, and some capabilities that we were able to kind of learn from that. Some other things that, just when I say, this was our first face-to-face kind of conference or trade show that we've attended since March, we've really kind of had to change gears on some different ways to target folks. And so just kind of discussing a few of the things that really kind of, these are some of the more new things as far as what can we do during this to make sure that we're getting the word out is we'd had some conversations, and we've got some staff that actually go out and physically map occasionally. And he was mentioning that they were, he would target areas that there wasn't even, the subdivision hadn't been built out yet, et cetera. And so we had discussed some signs and things in the past. And so then when the hurricane hit down south, I kind of just pulled the trigger on coming up with something that might be able to kind of help with that situation. So that's where the sign that you see on the left comes from. It's double-sided, but it's just a quick little reminder of 811. It doesn't provide a ton of details, but what we're able to provide on that bottom right-hand corner is a QR code. For anyone, you can take your camera up to that QR code, scan it, and it should link you directly to the Alabama 811 website. And so this is something I think we're going to kind of try to do a little bit more and just kind of see how it goes. And we haven't really rolled that out to the complete membership yet. But I think it's something that we might try to keep in stock a little bit more. I could see this going somewhere, and obviously we can modify wording and things like that as we go. The other picture that you see there with the different materials that are out. So another thing that we kind of have started on, and we've got pretty much all of them completed, so it's a matter of basically putting postage and mailing addresses on them, is a way to kind of reach out to some of these groups, once again, that we don't necessarily reach out to that often. And so what we have done, and Hayes manually went through this initial list of what you call rental companies, and started at about 750 or so, and we got it narrowed down to 200 legitimate equipment type rental companies. We're going to do kind of a little Alabama 811 welcome box, more or less. And it's just going to have a few of the materials that we kind of keep on hand and provide, just kind of an educational outreach effort. It'll have a cover letter in it, our business cards, and just some of the materials that we keep on hand to kind of hopefully maybe establish a relationship with some of these groups instead of necessarily going to each and every one of them, when we get the opportunity face to face. I thought this might be an opportunity that we might be able to kind of take advantage of. So this is about to go out here probably within the next few weeks. And I'm kind of encouraged by this. And Hayes kind of worked on, if you see there in the photo, he came up with a custom 811 mailing box as well. And so that goes out. It should catch their attention, and hopefully somebody should, not throw it in the trash, obviously. So, and the other thing in the bottom right-hand corner, that's just, how can we still do some educational efforts and outreach? And so one of the things that we looked at early on is just kind of being available. And so it didn't really go off very well, but at least it was an outreach effort, and at least it was something, and it was an attempt at something. So what I started doing right when everything hit was on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., I would just be online with the same link, and anyone could kind of log in, ask questions. We just kind of made ourselves available. And so that was one of the things that we did differently. It didn't go off well, like I said, but really it's just kind of trial and error in some of these things. But now what I've kind of been working on over the past month or so, just when I've gotten the opportunity, is doing kind of a lunch on us series. And so we're going to try to once again target some of the groups that maybe we don't have as much contact with. So we've kind of looked at starting to establish some relationships with a little bit more with the Utility Contractors Association group. We've got a pretty good relationship with those guys, but also the Alabama Subcontractors Association. And Hayes has actually just spoke with those guys yesterday and kind of sent out a little informational packet to them today, and just kind of reaching out to see what we can offer. But one of the things that I think we might try to do is do some form of a quote unquote lunch on us format, where, a couple of times a month, the budget money is basically there because of the fact that we have not done a lot of our face-to-face with travel expenses and those kind of things, to maybe take some of that and reallocate it to be able to maybe provide lunch for a group, have it delivered 15 or 20 minutes prior to when they're supposed to log in, and then provide them a webinar login link, and we conduct a webinar and provide them lunch. So this is something that I'm going to kind of start on a small basis, see if there's some interest there. And if it doesn't really hit well with those kind of two target groups, then we'll open it up to kind of some more of the membership. So just some various things, some different items basically that we've kind of worked on with that. So that's kind of my portion of it. And like Annette mentioned, is any questions towards the end or whatever else, we'll be kind of happy to answer.
Okay. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the routine information that we monitor every year as we look at our progression from one year to the next, and as well as some of the additional challenges. I mean, I know all of our companies and have had member companies and contractor groups have had extra challenges this year, but sometimes, you know, I think it's kind of good to look at it from other people's perspective and see how things are being addressed. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the excavation community did not really slow down, but how do we address some of the impacts that came into that? So again, 2020 would have been a very interesting year if COVID had not happened for us, because there were so many changes, and beginning to look at some of the trends that we had monitored and how to compensate for those trends moving forward as routines and patterns and habits change. So when you throw COVID in there, that also had an impact. It's really going to be a tough year to really look at 2020. I think there was a lot of learning experience, but when you look at trends, it's going to be one of those years statistically that, you know, we just may have to toss aside, which, you know, I think a lot of people would like to toss 2020 aside. But now that we're almost winding up this year and moving into 2021, you know, what are we going to have to look at? And again, the membership recruitment is going to be a lot of our activity. The largest number of potential members that we have out there are the ones that will come in this next year. And as Matt mentioned with the service area editor, you know, we're having to be really creative on working with these. You know, one of the challenges that we have from the operational standpoint is we deal with very small municipal rural water systems that have very rough mapping and may, you know, not have anybody in the office to interact with. And we have some that still, you know, kind of close their administrative doors at Wednesday at noon, to the point of having really large utilities, as Matt has said, is those that have come on this year that have a lot of technology that we have to work with and interface and operate. So we have to really have a wide gamut of how we interact with the potential members. So as we, you know, how we work with those, we have added an additional staff person to try to gear up and educate on working with the GIS data, so they can assist in helping those utility companies build their service areas for notification and kind of train them on how that works. So a lot of 2021, we will be dealing with the bulk of the potential members. Right now, we have about 460 members. And so we figure when you start pulling in those rural waters and some of the municipal groups and some of the telephone companies and a few cable, we've got majority of the cables, you know, we're looking at possibly doubling that this year with membership. So it's going to be a very busy year under that area. The other area that we'll look at, again, is looking at the activation of the enforcement process. It's not going to be perfect when it first comes through. You know, there's going to be some things that are going to have to be tweaked and looked at, and going through and educating entities on how that's going to work. Some of the things that we're working from the One Call Center is, you know, working that into our presentation, putting that on the website, coming up with training modules that we can send out to people that they can do those online to educate them. And just it's going to be a little different scenario. Part of the enforcement process is complaint driven, so it won't be tied to damages, but when people file complaints, how do they file them? What's a valid complaint? So there's going to be a lot of training and education process through that as well. And as if we're not a glutton for punishment already, the software that we use to process the locate request has been kind of under a revision implementation for the last little while. And so as things have progressed with that, we're hoping that that will roll out this year. So we'll also have to work. Our member company should not see any direct change from that, but changes on training the agents on some of the interface changes, the operational management people learning different ways to interact with those databases and build those databases. So we're hoping that that will roll out in 2021, because we're really kind of due to begin to tweak some of that software. We've had some fixes for things that we needed, and we need it to be in a little bit more of a solid avenue. And then, even though a lot of legislative changes began in 2019, there are some areas that we continue to note that action is going to have to be made. Just to give an example, when I talked about the enforcement, we set up the Underground Damage Prevention Fund. And even though it was set up under state statute, apparently when it went through the powers that be in the state government, it wasn't put under the state budget committee. So we're having to go through and look at how to put that wording in the legislation so that we can, right now, we can accept penalty payments into that fund, but we can't expense any money out of that. So a few things like that. And we're continuing to kind of pull a list. When we did the legislation last year, we tried to target on some of the main areas we thought needed to be addressed immediately, but we've kind of got a little boilerplate list of other areas that need to be addressed. So we'll begin to kind of look at those. I don't anticipate any operational legislative changes in 2021. I would pretty much want to bound and gag anybody who suggested it, because we still have a lot to do from the changes that were implemented in 2019. But other than some of the cleanup we have to do for the enforcement board. But as we continue to move forward, educating those individuals in Montgomery on who we are and what we do, and beginning to look at other improvements to improve damage prevention efforts. So I would look to begin to pull those groups together to look and build that stakeholder support over the next couple of years. One of the things that we will have an opportunity to do is we have been asked to speak to the Senate committee that hears a lot of our legislation. So we'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks, which is a very good opportunity for us to educate them further on the damage prevention process in the state of Alabama, where it's weak, where it's strong, what we need to look at doing to continue to keep Alabama safe. And then again, we don't know what impacts COVID-19 will continue. We've tried to give you a good idea of how that's impacted us operationally, but as facility companies and excavating communities begin to also deal with their fallouts from that, how that's going to impact 2021 in educational opportunities, in call volume, and being able to, how our members are able to respond to tickets and as we go through this next winter month. So again, 2021 is going to be another year. I think, we may have to run a little bit by the seat of our pants, but we've worked really hard in the past years and then this year to try to be proactive and look at things moving forward to be able to address some issues and problems that we may or may not anticipate, to ensure that we continue to provide a good quality service to our members and the excavating community to do our part in the damage prevention process.